The U.S. Constitution was signed by 40 white men in 1787 when the population in the United States here was about 4 million people. Now, of course, we only counted slaves, black slaves, as 5/8 of a human being, and the Aboriginals, the Indians, we didn't even count them. They weren't even worthy of being counted. The U.S. Constitution is essentially an employee manual written by citizens describing what their employees, the government, may, shall, and may not do. Of the 600 or so national governments that have existed throughout the history of man, it's my opinion that our U.S. Constitution is the best national constitution ever written. So I give it props for that. I respect the Founding Fathers, and I think they were likely wise and well-read fellows. I appreciate that many of them acted with positive intentionality and really thought they could create a good government, which had never been done before. They did a lot of reading, they had some great ideas, and I think they really thought they could do a good thing, most of them. So then why do I have a problem with the U.S. Constitution being a valid and good document? The biggest issue that I see is the concept of contracts. Contracts are an agreement between two or more parties, right? So if the United States contract had been signed by 4 million people, then I think it would have been a valid and acceptable contract for those 4 million people. Now, any person that didn't sign the contract, they're not bound by it. Now, what about the various social contracts, like the one that Thoreau came up with the idea of? And there have been hundreds of people with various ideas of social contracts, and they've all come up with some great ideas about what they think might be a good idea for everybody to agree with each other about in regards to society. The truth is, social contracts don't exist. They can't exist. Various people in society might suggest that they should, and perhaps they should, but they don't. They can't. Hitler's social contract was not very appealing to Jews. Wyoming's traditional family coalition social contract would not be very appealing to gay folks, and California's social contract is not very appealing to gun owners. The concept of a social contract is based upon society being a legal party and upon a few representatives of that society speaking on behalf of all individuals in that society. This is ludicrous. You can't sign a contract on behalf of someone else without their approval. And their implied approval is what most social contracts are based on, and it just doesn't hold water in this case. So, in order to agree with the United States Constitution being a binding legal document that we should all uphold and love and respect and try to get back to, we would have to say that it is okay for wise white men to claim power of attorney on behalf of 100,000 of his neighbors in regards to matters relating to government. That was in the population back in the late 1700s. In today's world, in a population of about 300 million people in the United States, we are supposed to still abide by a contract signed on our behalf 220 years ago by white men we didn't even know, some of whom thought women should not work outside the home, and some of whom thought other humans could be owned as slaves. 7.5 million people today per each signer in 1787. Really? Seriously? We should take that seriously? That 7.5 million of us per signer? We should think that they spoke for us now, today? Now, I can't imagine how a contract can exist unless it's agreed to by all parties. If I don't agree with the contract of 1787, do I have to live by its terms? An example, if attractive women at the college Chester attended chose not to live by the social contract Chester signed on their behalf, requiring them to provide him with the personal services of his choice, would it be moral for him to take money from the student society to hire armed folks to use force to enforce the campus social contract that he came up with? If 51% of the campus society had voted and agreed with this contract of Chester's, would the other 49% of the signers be bound by it? Of course not. It's ridiculous. The same is true with the United States Constitution. Again, great document as far as that type of document goes. But social contract documents are not valid or real. Even if contracts did exist, should we stubbornly base our social laws on a historical document like a constitution? I was reared in Muddy Pond, Tennessee, in a Mennonite community. Now, the traditional Mennonites, like the Amish, hold as part of their religion an aversion to modern and worldly things. Many won't use metal-treaded wheels on their tractor, or actually they will use metal wheels on their tractor, but not a rubber tire, because that's a newer, more worldly thing. Many of them will use a kerosene lamp, but not an electric lamp. This insistence upon utilizing the best technology of 100 or 300 years ago, but refusing today's technology, is certainly a departure from reason and logic. To insist upon a strict interpretation of the Constitution would only seem reasonable if one believes that there have been no new or better ideas since the late 18th century. Most of us would agree that the constitutional amendment allowing black people to vote was a good thing. If it is okay for our lords or senators to update that rule, then what is wrong with them updating the General Welfare Clause based on input from 51% of the population, probably the same people that agreed with Chester's social contract, to, let's say, include a Lamborghini being gifted to every person that turns 16, paid for out of the federal government's bank account? What's the difference? I happen to think that one of them makes more sense than the other, but what if my opinion is only held by 49% of the dissenting voters that are also the people that are taxed to pay for those Lamborghinis? We're brought back to the myth of the social contract, aren't we? Only 20% of the 300 million individuals alive on Election Day in 2008 in the United States voted for Obama. Similar was true of Bush before him. Are the other 80% of individuals really bound by a loose contract that 20% of their neighbors signed? So you might say, what do we do? Throw away the Constitution and local, state, national, world government? How's society going to be organized? How will there be peace? The good news for me is that I don't have to answer this question. There are about 7 billion other people out there, many of them with far better minds than mine. Many are far better read than I am. We, the people of the world, can interact with each other in a voluntary manner without using force or giving someone the title of government and asking them to use force on our behalf. No one can come up with a perfect solution today. Neither can the 12 kings, or the top 12 governments, or the top 1,000 presidents of the top 1,000 governments. We must each make our own decisions and sign our own contracts with our fellow neighbors. The concept of DROs, as described by Stefan Molyneux, might be a good solution. Maybe not. Only the free market can and should sort it all out. I'm not suggesting an armed revolt against the people that claim to be affiliated with various governments, senators, kings, armed police enforcers, mayors, tax collectors, or lords. Like the idea of black people voting or women being suited to working outside the home, the ideas of a society without government is not achievable in this decade by a physical revolution. It is, however, achievable in the upcoming centuries by means of a revolution of ideas. There are some good folks out there with good ideas. I suggest you check out their ideas, their articles, their audio and video lectures on YouTube, the internet, books, or other mediums. Check out Stefan Molyneux, the Mises Institute, fee.org. Check out the works that Ayn Rand did and the objectivism. Take a look at many of these people that have some pretty neat ideas that may or may not work, but are certainly worthy of examining. Thanks for taking the time to listen to this. I hope that it stirred up your mind and made you want to think and go out and prove me wrong or right or come up with some new ideas.